We'll call this meeting to order. I'm John Strand, your chair of this SRC committee, and we'll run around the table and do introductions if you will. Tim Mahoney, Mayor of Fargo.
Mike Williams, Public Representative.
Dave Beats, Fargo Park District.
James Hand, Fargo Schools.
Chad Brusso, Cass County Electric.
Sean Paschke, XL Energy.
Bruce Grubb, Fargo Administration.
Greta Greimig, Public Representative.
Ben Dow, Fargo Public Works.
Sean Radnick, Inspections.
Becky Majerus, Facilities.
Megan Aushow, Planning and Development.
Okay, and Bruce, nobody online, right?
I don't believe so.
Yes.
Oh, is there?
Whoop, whoop.
Hello.
Who's online?
Hello, my name is Seth Strongen. I'm with HDR.
Perfect. You guys, okay. We'll continue on with our agenda items. Does anybody have any additions or changes to the agenda? If not, I'll call for a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
I move.
Move to approval. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Same with minutes. Any changes or corrections of our last meeting? Not, I'd entertain a motion to approve the minutes of June 11th.
Move to approve.
Move to approve. Second.
Second.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay? Okay, we'll continue. I'm excited about this next information. Bruce, I'll let you introduce the agenda items and go forward, but
Yeah, I happen to travel 4th and 5th Street to and from work every day. And so I've been watching the work going on at Prairie St. John's. Just really interested in what's going on there, both the new construction and the demolition of the old building. And when Chairman Strand, when you suggested, maybe this would be a good place through the SRC for us to make a little public piece about what's going on there, particularly with respect to materials recycling. I mean, none of this is going to the landfill, which is a big feat. And so reached out to Matt Shepard, who is Prairie St. John's Director of Facilities. And Matt is with us today. He didn't have a whole lot of time to react to me, so I really appreciate his turnaround on this thing. But he's got a presentation here, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I do.
great, thank you, Matt. And where are the Shepherds from?
Just came back to the community, had moved down to the Twin Cities, so living in West Fargo right now.
Okay.
And had moved away. Actually, I was the Director of Facilities for the Housing Authority for a few years.
I grew up with a lot of Shepherds up in northeastern North Dakota. So,
Okay. Yes.
good. And Zoe, thank you for joining us. We're just starting our demo, our Prairie St. John's demo landfill recycling project, which is just amazing to see. So I'll let you continue, Matt, and thank you.
Thank you. On behalf of Prairie St. John's, thank you for inviting us here to tell this story. Here's the rendering. It's close to this look right now. We still have that front piece to finish. So this is our wrap up front canopy. We're just adjusting a little bit to the approach. We'll move a little to the west. Just a little bit about Prairie St. John's to set the stage here a little bit. Prairie St. John's, fully licensed 132 bed behavioral health facility, serve adults, children. We also have partial hospitalization for our outpatient programs, and we've also grown our sustainable or supportive housing. We've opened up a second building for that for people that are enrolled in our outpatient. The vast majority of our patients are from the local Fargo-Moorhead region and serve the Minnesota, North Dakota, and also bordering states. So to get into what we were requested to visit about was the proud to report on the demolition materials that we've been able to recycle. And you'll note, I'm sure many of those on this committee are interested in this, and know some of these facts, but 30% of overall waste worldwide can be attributed to construction waste. So by diverting this from landfills, it certainly adds life to the landfills. And the primary materials that we recycled on site were masonry, asphalt, concrete, metals. And there was some salvage of equipment that was past our useful life, found new life elsewhere, such as a couple older generators. The demolition company is able to move those on to new homes. And as you can see, the benefit for us was not needing new materials hauled in. We had considerable fill that was needed, required to bring our parking lots up to an equal grade to the building. So I'll go through a few slides that folks have driven by and watched as we've started to demo this spring. And much of this there's quite a bit of abatement that happened last fall. So when springtime came, we hit it pretty hard in early April. And you'll see that they start to separate on site. They'll start to separate the metals, and there's a combination of crushing. They'd bring down the big slabs. A lot of it was poured in place slabs. Bring it down, crush it, and then pulling out manually with their equipment, pulling out metal. And here you start to see that we're down to the lower foundation. We've got large pile of metal was up front here. We were considered substantially demolished in the latter part of June. And there was a little bit of a lull in time as we waited for some of that crushing equipment that you see actively on site now. Some of the materials, it was fun to work with the contractor to tally up what these ended up, and some of it's still growing. You'll drive by now, there's still metals that are being pulled out of the crushers. So there's quite an extensive piles of metals out there right now. The asphalt equated to 4,100 tons of asphalt. That's been crushed, and that's actually starting the next phase. I apologize. That's the next phase where the concrete is wrapping up in the next week. Steel pulled out 1,100 tons. That was recycled. Concrete and masonry, that pile, literally at the height of that pile, it was over 40 feet tall. The building itself is about 55 feet, so it's reaching the roof of that. And this is a relatively recent photo. It looks similar today. The pile's getting bigger, but at some of the depth of that fill, and this is the crushing and the active dozers and getting the compaction in there, and we're at 96, 97% compaction in there. Some of that depth is at 12 feet up towards the canopy. It's at 12 feet where the foundation was and where the basement was. So it gets to be quite a depth. So the big numbers are kind of repeating some of those, but you can see the second at the bottom line, the landfill, only 9% of that entire facility ended up landfilled. So that counts some of the windows, some of those products. So 9% out of that 91% of the materials was repurposed or recycled. So it's quite a story when you look at the grand totals there. And some of the additional impacts you try to quantify is 568 estimated semi-trucks to haul if we would have hauled that off-site. Nearly 23,000 tons of construction demo out of there. Like I said, some of that's still growing with there's still some metals being hauled out in the next couple of weeks. Landfill diversion extends the useful life of that. Reduced labor, high demand. There's a lot of construction going on in town. We're massive shortage of drivers. Road wear, obviously alleviate the wear and tear on that. And those 568 trucks, that's one-way traffic. I mean, so that's going two ways to and from the site, so you can double that. And then also just the delivery simply of bringing new materials, raw materials back to, if it would have been class 5 gravel, whatever product we would have used. So that would have been additional traffic back to the site. So that concludes what I have. If anybody's got any questions, I'll take them. I may or may not have them. I could come back.
Matt, what were your financial considerations when you're weighing whether to recycle and reuse or to just throw to the dump?
I was not there during some of that initial. I've only been with Prairie for 4 months, so I had missed out on that really front end of that.
We have somebody on the mic, if they could put it on mute, please. Okay, sorry.
So I was not in on the front end conversations of how that was evaluated, but I do know they took into consideration the considerable fill that would take to bring that up. I believe the elevation's at 895 for the finished floor inside the hospital, so to bring that up took a lot of fill. And one of the other sustainable features on there didn't exist previously was a retention pond that's a controlled release of water into the storm.
Go ahead, Bruce.
I'm just fascinated as I drive by at that humongous pile of rebar that one point in time held concrete together. How do you get it out of there? You were telling me that when you walked in. I find that fascinating, a combination of really, really big magnets and other things.
Yeah, so during the demo, I mean, they had, and I forget the tons of pinching power on some of that, but they would literally pinch, crush that cast in place concrete, get the rebar out, get the bulk of it, get the corrugated steel out. But now during the crushing, there's magnets that are pulling out as they crush. So there's several semi-loads of steel yet that you wouldn't have seen from the piles just a couple weeks ago.
What is the hope for the space where the hospital was?
That will be our parking. So we'll have parking now where the hospital was removed. So in that place will be towards the street. That'll be a combination, primarily parking, but there'll also be green space there. And then to the north, where the pre-existing parking lot, that's being reconstructed higher, closer to the elevation of the hospital.
I've just never seen anything like this in Fargo or any place. Maybe it's more common than I would know. But the notion of recycling and taking these materials and getting new use out of them, I just wonder, how could we, how could we do more of this? Like the Lashkowitz just came down. Wouldn't imagine if we'd had an ability to recycle and reuse those components versus just take them to the dump. That's a 20-story building or so. But that to me is really intriguing. Mike, do you remember anything like that when you were on the commission, or Mayor Mahoney?
When I used to work road construction and did curb and gutter, and that's when they first started to crumble up the highway materials and then reuse it. But now that's common practice, but that's 50 years ago. But I hadn't seen it for buildings like this. It was really cool to see that. And then, portable batch plants, we used to do that too. So sometimes instead of hauling concrete from a remote site, you'd bring a batch plant right to the site and then you'd use it on site, like we did at the energy plants.
You do see it quite often with, especially, I'll say, federal highway departments or state highway departments. It's very common they'll set their piles to the side, crush them, put them back as their base fill.
Is it just cost prohibitive, do we know, or cost affordable? I'm just curious how we could get folks to do this more. Ben, would you have any idea?
I think it takes the right building, and you saw them do it on the Kmart building down on South University Drive. The developer did the exact same thing. They rubbled it and then they crushed it and then they hauled it off site. So I think that's the biggest thing, is this was the right fit, the right building, a concrete sectional building. And so as you see those buildings that were built, when was that one built?
The original was, I think, about 100 years old, and then there's
Yeah.
some additions in the 60s and 70s.
So you see some of those buildings that the concrete was good quality, and there's a lot of metal and rebar in there. So it makes for a good recycle project.
If the city were to demolish, do we have any policies or practices that we consider if we ever demolish our schools, I'm wondering, or? Not that it happens every day, but.
Rob, you should know that question.
Well, the permit, I'm not going to put Sean on the spot, but permits are issued through inspections. But what I can say is, we'll use Mid-America Steel as an example. When that was demoed after they were moved out to the Northside Industrial Park, most of what came out of there got recycled. Now, a lot of metal buildings, which it seems like when it's metal, it's a little bit easier to recycle than some of these other materials, but nearly all of Mid-America Steel was recycled as well.
And when we built the new library, we saved some of the granite. When you walk up the stairs, library, that's used from the original building. There's a few other components too. But even when we built the Roco ramp and Kilbourne Group built that additional apartment, the wrap, they saved some of the old Carnegie Library there. So if you look at the foyer and you see those bricks, that's the old Carnegie Library. It's a very small piece of it, but it's just good to, use, remember how things came to be and reuse them when you can. But I agree with you, John. We can do a lot more.
Matt, I assume that asbestos mitigation is an earlier phase if it's needed?
Asbestos?
Yeah,
Correct.
removing that, so that's all gone before anything?
Yes, all the hazardous materials are abated fall, I'll say. It was October, November they began. So that's been all abated.
Anybody have any more questions, input? This is just a good example of something I think we could have on our radar to aspire to every chance we can as a community. And I don't know if we could ever find ways to incent businesses or corporates or anybody that's doing projects, developers to consider this versus just the easy landfill route. I'm not sure it's easy, but it's really, to me, this is an example of what we should do more of when we can. And Prairie St. John's, I ran into Tim Mathern, and he had explained, I was asking him, well, what are you doing there? And what's this all, and he said, it's costly. And it's a major philosophical decision, but it's very costly. And I don't know how, but I thank you for sharing this with us and your institution for being these types of stewards of our environment as you're going forward.
I appreciate that, and I'd offer, if anybody's interested in any tours, reach out, track me down, and you're welcome. We'd love to show you our facility.
Mr. Chairman, so it holds a big spot in my heart. We grew up a block south of there. I was the youngest of 10 kids, and my oldest brother was 22 years older than me. And he carried me home before my mom even got out of the hospital. But I was a big kid, I was 10 pounds. So my 7 sisters said, I thought we were having a baby. And then you bring in this big luff. They were disappointed.
Okay.
All right, anybody else? Thank you, Matt, very,
Thank
very
you.
sincerely, and tell your organization thanks. All right, Bruce, let's go on to our next topic, please.
Yeah, item number 5, you might recall this at our February 13th SRC meeting. We reviewed a sustainability roadmap, and that was prepared by HDR in consultation with kind of a staff working group that we had put together. Colin Rolfing with HDR back in February gave a high-level introduction to the roadmap at that meeting. But we really didn't talk about where it goes from here. We were in possession of this draft roadmap. Well, a couple of weeks ago, a local newspaper reporter did a sustainability story about efforts being done in our region, Fargo, Moorhead, and West Fargo. And the reporter wanted to know about things that had been done previously and what plans there are looking forward into the future. And so Archie from Communications and I met with the reporter and shared the white paper, those things that have been done in the past. And then looking forward, we shared this roadmap with her as well, realizing that we hadn't really discussed anything in terms of next steps yet. So in trying to explain this roadmap to the reporter, I found myself struggling a little bit. So after that interview, I got a hold of HDR and said, could you produce a narrative to go with this graphic that kind of helps the reader walk through this and understand what the symbols mean and all that? So they did that. I think it's really useful. I included that in your meeting packet today, and I asked them to be here again today to walk us through that descriptor that accompanies this map, and then after they're done with that, and talk about where you'd like this to go from here. So
Great.
So we do have Seth Strongen with us today from HDR, He's got a fancy title. He's their Building Decarbonization Planning Director. And so Seth, thank you for being here. Thanks for putting that together for us. And so now we'll not only have a map, we'll have instructions on how to read it. So Seth, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, great. Thanks so much, Bruce. I really appreciate it. And really, what a fantastic project that Matt and the Prairie St. John team have going on there. Kudos all around on that. And, that is a great example of taking advantage when an opportunity presents itself. But as Bruce said, we can also look forward strategically, so we can start to plan the actions and the steps that the city can take to try to realize these sustainable outcomes that we've kind of mapped out here. And so what I wanted to do today is just kind of walk through, this is the roadmap that you're looking at on the screen here. And as Bruce said, attached with the packet is a narrative explanation, but I want to take this time to kind of walk you through, so hopefully you can gain an understanding of what this is saying. And then, if you have questions, you can go and read back through the narrative as well, and we can address any questions as they come up here. So what I first want to do is orient you to how this is set up. So if you move from the left-hand side of the screen over to the right, you'll notice that in the far left, we're categorizing the city's operations, the elements that the city is involved in, where there is an opportunity for sustainability. We're breaking that into two different categories. One is thinking about infrastructure and the services that infrastructure provides. And then the other is looking at the facilities that are city-owned and public facilities. And then as we start to move left to right, you'll see after we think about the infrastructure and facilities, there are different subtypes within there. So there's various areas of the city's infrastructure where there's opportunities to find to improve the sustainability performance of the city. So we see those as water, solid waste, transit and transportation, and energy. When we think about the facilities, we can split those into your portfolio of existing city facilities, and then also trying to think about when there's going to be new projects designed moving forward, or if there's any standards that want to be put in, like we just talked about these great lessons learned at Prairie St. John. And so if there was, any lessons that want to be carried forward into city policies or codes, that would be looking at new forthcoming facilities. And then finally, to kind of frame everything that is in the heart of the roadmap, we've divided that into different time frames. So the roadmap looks out from here out to 2050. So we're covering a 25 plus year range, but obviously there's certain actions that can and should be taken sooner in the near term. There's other things that are going to really take some time, and there's going to be a sequence of actions that need to be taken in order to be able to implement some of the later changes. And so for that reason, we've broken it up into basically into different decades, but those are the different time frames. We've got our short-term time frame over here out to 2030, and then our medium time frame would be in the 2030s, and then that longer-term time frame would be getting us out to that 2050 time horizon that the roadmap is created around. Within each of these categories, you'll notice also that there are both actions that can be taken, and those lead to outcomes. And so the actions are represented in the boxes and or the cylinders, and the outcomes that the actions will help to achieve are in the starred circle type shapes that are on each of the dividing points between the time frames. Before we dive into any of the specific substance around the types and the subtypes and the areas where there's action, does anyone have any questions about the orientation of the document or anything about sort of interpreting the layout before we get into what the details are?
Go ahead, Bruce.
Seth, this is Bruce. I'm sure you were probably going to speak to this, and I don't want to steal your thunder, but if you look at the roadmap and you'll see acronyms CPRG and EECBG, we've already pulled the trigger on those. And so Becky Majerus, our facilities director, has taken it one step further, and the direct allocation of EECBG money, it's sitting there. We've got to request the project to start withdrawing that, and Becky has started that process. So I wanted to make sure Becky got recognized for that. So, okay, Seth, back to you.
Yeah, thanks, Bruce, and thanks, Becky, for taking those actions. You're absolutely right that aptly so. The green boxes represent funding and specific potential funding sources that can support many of these actions, as is kind of described above. And the really important point in there that you just made, Bruce, is that there are actions that are already in place. And this is providing that map that we can use as all of the sets of actions, but that's not to say that this is not already in progress. So this is just at the beginning, but this helps to give us the guide as we continue to operate through it and deal with, frankly, a wide range of different sustainability outcomes depending on the aspect of city operations we're talking about. Great. Well, let's go ahead and jump right into the structure then. So we'll move from top to bottom here. So we'll go first through the infrastructure sections, and then we can carry each of those across time. So we're kind of focusing on the same topic. And so, when it comes to water, that's a topic obviously that has already been extensively studied in various forms in the city. And so we know, like the Red River Valley Water Supply Project, as well as other previous studies around reclaiming treated wastewater and rainwater harvesting, and being able to use non-potable sources for irrigation, and ultimately then for all non-potable uses within the city. So really, in this case, what we're recommending is that there already has been quite a lot of work done, and some great ideas that have come and strategies that have come out of those studies. We'd really recommend taking some time to find the strategies that do kind of make the most sense in the short term. We don't need to reinvent the wheel and just do another study to do another study. There's some great information that's already out there. And we feel like by implementing what gets recognized as the priority projects, that is setting up for a progressive use of these non-potable water and being able to conserve potable water for human consumption. So by engaging in these projects over time, the near-term goal is to reach irrigating, using all of the irrigation water from these non-potable sources, and then eventually to bring those that non-potable water for toilet flushing and for other uses where it's not touching humans, and ultimately by the end of 2050, we believe that can get to optimized overall water systems for the city.
Seth, I have the dumbest question in the world, but what type of infrastructure changes? Does everybody have to rebuild their buildings and houses and plumbing and everything? Or how far, how does that get implemented to convert to alt water versus for like irrigation and toilets and stuff?
Yeah. So it may involve being able to use the water inside the building for flushing purposes likely would require plumbing changes to establish a second parallel plumbing system that can provide the non-potable water for non-potable uses. As far as being able to capture this what would otherwise be wastewater, it does not necessarily need to be dual plumbed in order to be able to capture that wastewater, but again, to be able to reuse it, to bring it back to site for irrigation or into the building for toilet flushing, et cetera. That would require some dual plumbing, and that's why we have that one out a little bit further into the future. But you're right that there are infrastructure implications to that.
Is this being done anywhere now? Any examples we could look at and go, look what they're doing?
Yeah. There are many examples throughout the country. I don't necessarily have reference points in your immediate area, but the reuse of partially treated. So in all cases, this reused water is treated. I don't mean to suggest by any stretch that it's just reusing directly wastewater. It's just not up to potable standards. And so yes, that reuse of water of non-potable water for flushing, it happens quite a bit in certain parts of the country, including in California and in some of the western states where there's significant drought considerations. So, there are code implications as well. That is something that would typically have to be revisited. But yes, there are examples, and we'd be happy to provide some specific ones if there's interest in diving into that further.
If I may, Commissioner Strand, the closest, most robust use of water resource in the region would be the St. Paul State Stadium. They collect all their stormwater to use for irrigation of the baseball field, and then they also have a water treatment system inside the building for their urinal system. So that would be the closest as far as a private use. Right here in town, up at the reclamation facility, we've got IRF 1 and reuse facility number 2 that are all pumping potable water out to Castleton to use for water cooling for the ethanol and soybean crushing plants. So that's also another example of this on a commercial scale, where we are doing this currently with the city of Fargo.
It'd be kind of interesting to see this become a practice where people consider the alternatives when you're building something new, to then know that these options are there versus just the way everything's done always. Maybe, again, I don't know, but maybe we have a way of with developers and big projects of encouraging this type of practice in the future if it's beneficial to the planet. I don't know what type of incentive or what type of ask that would be or what type of cost it would be, but it'd be interesting to get that in people's thinking caps, especially for anything new. Go ahead, Bruce.
It's kind of interesting that in the street you've got a potable water main and you've got a sewer main. And for this gray water or treated secondary effluent, it's not drinkable. The standard is you put that in a purple main. So when you dig up a street, you can tell what you're dealing with based on the color of the pipe. Kind of interesting.
Excellent. Okay, moving down the roadmap into the waste area. This is starting to touch on some of the items that the folks from Prairie St. John were talking about. They were specifically talking about construction and demolition waste. Of course, the waste stream is broader than just construction and demolition waste, but it's the same idea that and similar to water, where there have been previous studies done looking at the material flows, what recovery values there might be from being able to reuse materials and sort of set up a circular economy, which is exactly what Prairie St. John is doing by taking materials that would otherwise be going into a waste stream and productively reusing those. And obviously there's cost implications there. And so again, with the work that's already been done to date, there's not necessarily a need to reinvent the wheel or just conduct another study, but that there really are some great ideas that have already been put out, or there's examples in individual cases that are already happening in the city. And so one area to potentially prioritize is to think about organic waste. Food waste typically is what we're thinking about in organic waste. This is material that can break down on its own outside of a landfill, and in fact breaks down better outside of a landfill, but produces usable products in terms of compost and fillers for soil and amendments. And so that's a perfect example of a win-win scenario, right? Where you're able to reduce the amount of waste that's going to landfill, but also have this beneficial product to reuse and either sell back to the market or avoid having to purchase that product yourself and to reuse it in-house. And just quick note, the construction and demolition diversion that we were talking about in the context of Prairie St. John, again, obviously there is a fantastic example of this happening now, right there in front of your eyes. And there's having an example is always the best way, right? And so we recognize that it's going to take a little bit of time to ramp up, but we do encourage you to focus on that specific area after addressing organics, and hopefully in maybe say like a 10 to 15 year time frame, you could get to that point where you're fully reusing as much of the content from construction and demolition waste content as is possible.
So Seth, I'm
any questions on the side?
I'm the king of dumb questions, but last year at the National League of Cities, there was a reference made to one of the least sustainable actions you can do is demolition of an existing structure. Now that kind of went over my head. I don't know if that's because you're losing the materials already into it, or if you should reuse them and save. Help me understand that concept of why is that, and we're demolishing buildings and houses, and just help me understand that sustainability perspective with demos.
Absolutely, yeah, and it's an excellent question. So it's definitely not a bad question at all. So I think my guess is the frame for that is looking at if you have an existing structure that its current use is not going to continue on, but you do want to replace with a new structure in the sort of conventional way of doing it, that would involve demolishing the existing facility and all of the waste that is created from that demolition process. Now, let's assume in this case that there is no construction and demolition diversion and recycling going on. So now you've created a waste stream and products that are going to landfill that prior were not needing to go. But then also on the back end, by building a new building, you're now bringing new materials to site, transporting those materials, having to, the process of making those materials has an environmental impact, and then bringing it to site. And so it's almost like a double hit where you're creating a waste stream from the demolition, but you're also creating an environmental footprint by building a new building and the materials that go into that. And so in theory, if it's able to reuse facilities or to do this construction and demolition waste recollection and then break it down to its raw materials and then put that back into a raw material supply, now you're sort of making that a more efficient process, because instead of sending those materials to landfill, you're using them to help contribute to that next structure that's going to be there. So you sort of made a materially efficient, more efficient process. So my guess is that's what they were getting at with that one.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Absolutely.
Greta, go ahead.
I have a question about the organic waste. So I seem to recall a while ago we discussed this on this committee, and I learned that the city's already considered this issue in some detail and decided that the current solution is the most workable, which is that we recapture the methane that's produced from the organic decomposition from the landfills, and that this wasn't something that the city was looking at doing. Does this mean that we are reconsidering that as a solution?
Bruce, how would you answer that?
Yeah, it's a good memory, Greta. Our sample organic or food wasting, or food waste, was actually a composting exercise that we tried with Great Plains software. That's not what they were called at the time. But anyway, they had started in their food service using compostable flatware, not plastic, but compostable paper plates. So they had all of the food waste that they kept separate, brought it out to us at the composting facility. What we found there was the rate of decomposition wasn't as fast as grass and leaves, so that we had to try to figure out a way to speed that up. And at the time, what we had across the street was a really, really big anaerobic digester called a landfill. And so when we put it in there, it really helped our gas production. Now, as we were talking about this, our solid waste team is watching us on television and sent me a text saying, just let the committee know, in 2022, we completed an organics diversion study that they would be happy to share the results of that with us. So some of these things up here, like water, aquifer recharge, there's been all sorts of studies done over the years, and that's where I suggested what we might want to do is compile the work already done and see what value we've already created, just haven't used yet.
And that question still surfaces, Greta. People still occasionally will ask, what are you doing here, or can you do anything? And I remember Microsoft, but I just didn't remember, Bruce, where it had gone or how things evolved.
Yeah, the idea was to incorporate that into our composting program. It was a good idea.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Mike.
It was at utility meeting and some of us were there, but Microsoft had come in and said, yeah, we're doing this. And then after a year, 6 months, they came to utility and he said, well, have you ever thought about just using plates and washable glasses and silverware? So that's what they do. And that saves the most.
All right, anybody else while we're here? Okay, you guys can continue, Seth.
Okay, great. So moving down the line, the next area we wanted to focus on is transit and transportation. And this is really broken out into two sub areas, because you've got the city's fleet of vehicles, to maintain the city's operations, but you also have the MAT bus and the public transportation. And so transit here is encapsulating both. There's obviously some level of overlap in the sense that they're, all related to transportation. They really are different vehicles, obviously a different ownership structure. And so they're sort of parallel. They're sort of parallel endeavors. And that's why we've listed it here. You'll also notice, just kind of taking a high level visual look, that this is the area where there are a lot of steps, right? There's a big fleet, and converting over the public transit is not a trivial task, and obviously there have been efforts to kind of take alternatives into consideration in the past, and so being mindful of that, we want to set a realistic time frame within which to start to take these actions and hopefully realize these outcomes. The other thing I'll note in here is that this is one of the areas where there's funding available, and particularly coming from some of federal sources who have been specifically through some of the recent infrastructure acts and other federal policy have made these grant programs available that are specifically focused around zero emissions mobility. This is just to put it in a broader context. One of the biggest areas of focus for sustainability and sort of emissions focused folks all over the country. So this is very much not unique to Fargo, but there's a lot of steps that are involved, and frankly, it is going to be costly. So there are a number of grant opportunities, again, that have been identified and that can help to contribute to ensuring these goals. And there's ways that we can break this up into maybe more bite-sized chunks so that it's not having to convert an entire fleet all at once, which is just obviously not practical and realistic, nor is it a good use of resources to, replace things before they're needed to be replaced. And so that's one of the reasons why the time frame is out here so long. And you can see, like, just diving in on the fleet side for a second, that even trying to take a separate look at kind of how you might look at light and medium duty vehicles as compared to your heavier duty vehicles. A big caveat for this whole thing is that there need to be alternatives available, right? Especially for some of these heavy duty pieces of fleet vehicles. There may not be very many options that are zero emissions options available right now, or they may not be practical for the needs of the city. And so again, some of this is going to sort of depend a little bit that there's going to be emerging technology over time. I can tell you that already now we are far more advanced in terms of replacement vehicles and the zero emission replacement vehicles than we were even, say, 2-3 years ago. So there's every reason to believe that will continue. But for those reasons, we think that it is in the city's best interest to kind of space this out over time and to take these into some chunks. So are there questions on this one? This one's got a lot of different dimensions to it.
Anybody at all? Okay, you can continue. Oh, go ahead, Bruce.
Just one quick thing, kind of similar to what I just mentioned about certain studies that might have been completed that everybody's not aware of. I know that Public Works and Central Garage, whether it's, the use of biodiesel blends, whether it's, I know the hybrid buses, hybrid vehicles, we've dipped our toe in the water of a few things that sure be nice if what we learned could be utilized to decide where we might go from here.
Yeah, and the big thing is we're really focused on emission reduction, because there's a lot of money out there to get a lot of those older high emission producing trucks off the road and do some emission reduction. There's a lot of changes going on in the industry right now, and I'm sure Seth can talk about that, but we're monitoring, because the big thing for a long time was CNG, compressed natural gas. Well, a lot of the large equipment truck manufacturers are going away from that because the battery technology is coming forward, and it's more progressive, and it's more valued resource in that sense. So it's really changing back and forth. So we're kind of just watching. We're focused on our emission reduction programs, and that's where we feel comfortable at this time.
And I will add, as far as this committee, this is a plug for the FM MetroCog HDR. We are leading the study for the electric vehicle readiness plan for the Fargo metro area. Mm-hmm. And we are at a point with this study that the public engagement, online engagement will begin here in the next couple weeks, maybe the first week in September. So I encourage the committee to engage in that online survey and gather some of that information as we move forward, and we put the tech report for siting and implementation strategies here, hopefully to be complete and presented to MetroCog in November. So this will fall in line with some of these funding strategies that we have outlined here. as Metricog and the stakeholders review and finish their report. And this is another good example of how all these studies that have the City of Fargo and the MPO have put together and how we can coordinate those to make sure that we're not repeating efforts.
Is it safe to think that if there's, is it just political? And if there's a change in administration, electric cars will have a different future? Yeah, the politics of EVs lately has just been perplexing me. And the advocacy and the voices that are anti, I mean, I'm curious, I don't know where the future goes.
Yeah, it's hard to know, hard to understand the political winds, but I think electric vehicles are here. The technology keeps improving. And I think that is the way of the future.
All right, anybody else?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I would point that this same phenomenon of a transition to specifically electric vehicles and battery-powered vehicles is happening outside of the United States as well. And so it's very fair to raise that political winds can change, and that certainly can influence funding that's available and the grants that can be applied for. But I would agree with Brian that this is, there may be some bumps in the road, no pun intended there, but this is the technology that is being implemented really throughout the world, at least in those places where mobility technology is evolving rapidly. And so where there are options around CNG and, we've seen some talk about hydrogen vehicles. I don't see as much effort going into developing CNG resources, especially globally. And green hydrogen it's a fantastic concept, but it does seem to be largely conceptual at this point, at least at scale. And so, we'd be hesitant to kind of, recommend going down that road. And so of the technologies that are really kind of emerging now, I would say that electric battery technology is definitely the one with the most momentum behind it.
Okay, you can continue, Seth or Brian.
Okay, wonderful. So moving down, when we think about the energy that is being supplied to the city of Fargo, that is arguably one of the areas that is going to have the most overall impact on emissions, in the sense that everybody in Fargo is using energy of some kind, right? And so the touch point of addressing energy supply means that you really are reaching into having an emissions impacts citywide throughout everyone. And fortunately, with great partners like Xcel Energy and Cascanti Electric, there are options for moving forward and being able to source lower emission and even getting to zero emission sources of electricity. So, thinking about renewable generation, also thinking about capturing waste energy and being able to reuse that. So I know we talked earlier in the waste conversation about the landfill gas and how that is captured and then reused and provided to others as a commodity. And so there are other potential opportunities for being able to find renewable and or zero emission sources of energy. When we look beyond just the energy providers themselves, though, as we start to think about the facilities, and this is a little bit of the transition into the bottom half of the roadmap here, is that there are also opportunities to think about what energy can be generated on site. And that has an added bonus of not only, being an energy source that is potentially low to zero carbon, but It also can improve energy resilience. So if there was an outage on the grid and facilities had their own on-site energy generation equipment, if they had like some form of storage or they had some form of they've designed the system to be able to reuse that directly on site, then in the event of these outages or any disruptions, there would still be a power supply available, and of course that would be a clean power supply. So I think that what we recommend is to look into a combination of partnering with the energy providers, as well as taking a look at where there are opportunities for on-site generation and distributed energy resources. And the outcomes that we hope to see from there, we do think that there's a lot of opportunity in the short term to realize significant benefit. It's going to be hard to get all the way to eliminate emissions from electricity in the next few years, but we do think that significant progress can be made, and that by 2030 you could realistically achieve something like 80% carbon-free electricity or zero carbon electricity. And then the more challenging sources to mitigate, or those factors that are using energy that's difficult to find a one-for-one replacement for, can be kind of gradually addressed over this next decade, so that by getting down by even like 2040, you really can be approaching and getting to a net zero energy, meaning that the amount of clean zero carbon energy is zero emission energy is that's being produced is equivalent to the amount of energy that's being consumed. So it can be on a net basis, just due to supplies like solar power only gets generated during the daytime. But of course, there are also long-term solutions to that, which would be a little bit out into the future once there's a supply established of carbon-free electricity. But you could look at significant storage, utility scale storage, or facility scale storage, or a combination thereof. And that will help to close the loop. And we talked about the net zero being able to be sort of using a net basis and sort of calculations of what gets produced and what gets pulled off. But as you start to bring storage into the mix, then you could actually close the loop and just have a net zero energy sort of on site all the time. Any questions on the energy piece?
Mr. Chairman, so Fargo does have an example of that at the Roberts ramp. So we had energy partners with Xcel Energy and Microsoft and eSmart Systems. And anyway, there's 40 solar panels on the roof, and then they power 3 battery storage systems, and then there's 10 EV chargers in the basement. So it's an example of distributed energy right here. And if they do have a power outage, they can tap in for the apartments to keep the lights on. So it really is a small example, but a good example of distributed energy 2 blocks from here.
Excellent. Yes, thank you for sharing that. That sounds like a fantastic example. Okay. Well, so as I said, energy is the space where we kind of move from there's the energy supply and how energy gets distributed throughout Fargo. But at the end of the day, the energy itself is being used to power facilities, right? The building that and room that you're sitting in and that we're all operating out of. So the carbon content of that energy matters, but also how the facilities use energy and what types of energy become a very, very big part of the mix. Now, obviously, there's a lot of privately owned buildings, and those that already exist that's an area that over time there can be small steps taken, but where there can really be huge opportunities is in the city's portfolio of existing facilities. And we see this as one of the areas where there's really some great opportunities to move quickly and to kind of prioritize this area, because we do feel that there are some quick wins that can happen. And as you kind of can see from this green that is in this area as well, there's also some funding opportunities that are currently out there, and we anticipate that there will continue to be funding areas, just like we do anticipate there'll continue to be funding opportunities in the mobility space, specifically around facilities. We do think that there's going to be continued opportunities. And so the first and most important thing when we think about the facilities is understanding how much energy are they using, and frankly, how much emissions are they producing as a result of that energy use, and what are the different types of energy that are contributing to that. And so even though there's certainly an understanding of what facilities are here, we need to get a facility-specific understanding of how that facility is using energy, and then that will help to identify opportunities to improve performance. But it'll actually also identify the biggest bang for the buck, the places where you should prioritize action so that you'll realize the greatest impact from the investments. And so there's already been significant activity in that space. As Bruce mentioned at the outset of my talk here, the EECBG funding has already been, Becky has been able to wrangle some of that funding and put it towards productive uses to improve the performance of the existing buildings, and to really help to make some specific improvements in specific facilities. Unfortunately, I do have to report that the other funding source that's listed up here is CPRG. That stands for the US EPA's Climate Pollution Reduction Grant Program. That program did actually just announce their most recent round of awards within the last month. And unfortunately, Fargo was not awarded any funding through this round of funding. That does not mean that there won't be future opportunities or similar programs that can help to support these efforts. But I did just want to point that out as a pretty recent development since this roadmap was first developed.
An interjection there, Seth. That's the LED light conversion project that we were all really excited about. And Bruce is reaching out. We're seeing if we can get some assistance in DC to see if we can resurrect that or however get back at that. But that was just really compellingly good information to have come our way. 2.6 million and $400,000 or $500,000 savings per year, and I just thought we had it. I didn't know that we were still competing for it. But anything we can do that would resurrect that would be really, really important and valuable.
Yeah, absolutely, and that would be a great use. Lighting is often one of the first places that we look to find savings in terms of energy usage, and so I do believe that there will be future funding programs available. It's unfortunate, that this round didn't come through.
Does anybody have any sense of that? Is that a political deal, or is it just, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't have any direct information, and I would sort of hate to fully speculate on all of the decision-making criteria. But one thing that I did notice, and this is sort of a non-scientific observation, if you will, but the programs that got funded tended to be quite large, and so maybe there was an element of just wanting it to be on a grander scale than than had been proposed here. But again, I hesitate to weigh in on the specific. It was just again non-scientific, but observation that there was some programs that were funded in up to hundreds of millions of dollars for a single program, and so perhaps there was just eyes were on those bigger ticket items. I'm not sure.
Okay, everybody else, at least we're shooting for the stars and aiming for things, and sometimes it'll stick.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And somebody made a great comment earlier that we've established these goals that we're trying to that we feel that you can get to, but it's not taking one step and suddenly you're at the goal, right? That's why these are out into the future, and there's lots of incremental steps that we can take and lessons that can be learned from those incremental steps as well. So emissions reduction is the name of the game, and if it's not complete elimination of emissions, that's okay. Moving forward in the right in the direction of reduction is the name of the game for this roadmap, and that's why it is spaced out over time. All right. Well, the last and sort of final section on here, I talked about at the outset that all of this infrastructure that's here and the facilities that we're thinking about. While we're looking into the future, this is thinking about what's kind of already here now, right, and how that's going to change. But we know that there will be a need to continue to develop new facilities and to replace existing facilities over time, with this time horizon being out to 2050. And I think there were some great comments throughout this whole meeting, even going back to talking about the construction and demolition waste, about are there opportunities to develop these standards, right? Some building guidelines or ways that future projects can be thinking, or sort of some rules that they'll need to implement in order to be able to develop these projects for the city. So you could put in requirements around, say, 50% of your construction and demolition waste for all city projects needs to be diverted from the landfill moving forward, or that you have requirements around energy efficiency that correspond to certain codes, and there are like international codes that you can reference. Now, some of these will require formal city actions to be taken. So I certainly don't mean to trivialize in implementing these standards and being able to enforce them, but there's a strategy that you can employ to ensure, as you were sort of referencing before, hey, we're going to keep building new buildings. So how can we make sure that we're taking these great examples that have been done, throughout the area? Where can we learn our best lessons learned and start applying that to everything moving forward that's, sort of within the public control? So that will eventually lead to much more efficient buildings, right? You'll be replacing older buildings with these new, more sustainable buildings. And over time, that will turn over and get you, in combination with addressing the existing facilities, that will get you to have this portfolio of public facilities that are green buildings, sustainable buildings, and a part of the emissions reductions goals. So thank you for bearing with me. I know that was a lot of content. There's a lot of categories in there. So I apologize for spitting so much information at you quickly, but it's really a reflection of the great efforts that are already happening and thinking that's already underway in the city, and just coming up with strategies to find some quick wins, but also to have some markers out into the future to work towards, so this committee in particular can help to drive that cause forward.
Seth and Brian, thank you really sincerely for this information. It's a lot to process and unpack, but it's a roadmap and it's a way forward. And what I look for in there is opportunities for funding. If we can, pull some access to grants or funding out of these efforts, that'll really move us forward more quickly. Bruce, anything else? Greta, go ahead.
Strongly agree.
This is just a little confusion on my part, but in your facilities section under the near term where you've got the purple diamonds that say design standards for Reno and procurement for Reno, what does that mean?
Yeah, so sorry, we ran out of physical space. RENO is a abbreviation for renovation. So when you are looking to renovate, say, City Hall or a library facility, much like I was talking about creating design standards for new facilities, you could also come up with those ideas for any renovation projects and retrofit type projects that happen.
Good question, Greta.
Excellent question.
You know, Seth, one of the benefits of us hearing and connecting like this is we have the Parks District here, we have the school district here, we have the city here. So
wonderful.
This information will ripple out, and I'm sure that it'll have actions and implications that will add up through time in that regard too, because they're here with us at the table. All right, Bruce, anything else?
Wonderful.
On this? Thank you very much. And anybody have any other questions, feedback for Seth and Brian? Good stuff. Okay. Anything else, Bruce, on that topic?
No, thanks for everybody's time. That's a mouthful there.
You know, here we have the former Public Works Director, City Administrator, current Public Works Director. This is a language you guys know pretty well over time. Mike Williams was involved with these things years ago and still here at the table. Okay. I'm not sure if there's anybody in the audience for public comment, but we'll call for public comment if there is anyone. Okay. We will continue forward. Our next meeting tentatively is October 8th. Thanks everybody for participating in this. It's just good to have our minds working together on this. Okay. Go ahead.
Could I make one thank you? I thought Abinia was going to be here. At her last meeting, she thought she would make this as her last meeting. So she won't be with us anymore. She's going to Princeton. Good for her. But we need the Youth Commission, hopefully, to appoint someone.
Who's going to Princeton?
Abinia.
Abinia. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Our student rep.
Yeah. So it's been nice having her.
About that.
Yeah. I just wanted to
Good to
a
share
thank
that.
you to make the minutes, so Shelley can capture that thank you to Abinia for.
And she handled our bus wrap project.
Yeah.
We should send her a plaque. Okay, anything else for the good of the order? The mayor's ordering her a plaque.
Gotta send her something, she's gonna have a wall full of things.
All right, we stand adjourned. Thanks everyone very much.